My father's text arrived like a bullet. We sold the house. The ops floor hummed radios, keyboards, blue glow on a map I could trace blindfolded. Ramstein, August 2023, smelled of coffee and cold metal. My phone trembled as if it knew I couldn't afford surprises. I glanced down expecting logistics. Instead, a sentence that split the day in half. Now. We sold the house. The words didn't blink. Signed by my father, they stared from the glass while the wall screens rolled on. I rolled my shoulders back. A soldier notices first, react second. But memory took the shot before training could. Magnolia summers the porch swing crooning in heat, lemon oil on the banister, my grandmother's hands guiding mine over folded flags and tarnished brass. Magnolia belongs to Alexandra. She understands legacy. The house wasn't square footage. It was the backbone of our name. Ma'am Staff Sergeant Michaels filled the doorway mission folder hugged to his chest. Brief in 5. Leave it, I said, keeping my voice level. He set the folder down and vanished. I opened the thread. Another bubble had arrived while I blinked. You're never home anyway. Ethan needs help. Ethan, my brother, always needed help. Investors to soothe. Loans to float. Excuses to launder. The ceiling vent whispered, and for a heartbeat the Levant map blurred into a Charleston grid. My thumb moved. If betrayal is a pattern, you follow lines. Charleston County property records loaded like a stubborn gate. I searched Magnolia's parcel number from memory. Transfer posted 3 days ago. Buyer Seaside Capital Group LLC. Sale price insultingly tidy. I opened the deed, heart settling into the cold rhythm I use when a mission turns surgical. The signature page waited like a smirk. Catherine Ward, attorney in fact for Alexandra Ward. My mother's name burned through 2 decades at once. I had revoked that power of attorney 5 years ago after one mistake with my accounts. I still remembered the stamp's dry thump at the clerk's counter. I pulled up the revocation from my encrypted drive, bold, unambiguous, and set it beside the deed like twin photographs that make a lie undeniable. My thumb hovered over the call icon and didn't press. Emotions make noise. Operations require silence. I kept digging. Seaside's filings listed a Broad Street address I knew from glossy galas. The director roll showed Robert Kingsley, which curved neatly toward my brother's fiancée. Keep it in the family, off the books, the kind of elegance sold at expensive tables. Briefing could wait now. The war at home had already started. I locked the phone, then unlocked it, compelled to see if the sentence would change. It didn't. I tucked the folder under my elbow and rose. The glass caught my reflection, hair-tight ribbons, a lined jaw set the way instructors corrected with a single-word control. I practiced it once silently. Then I reopened the portal. In the notary block, neat as a dress code, sat the date my mother pretended she still spoke for me. I sent the deed to my secure archive, appended the revocation, and tagged both with a label I'd never used for family evidence. The porch swing creaked somewhere in my ribs. Duty is simple when you know where to aim. This is not just betrayal. This is war. They thought distance would silence me. They forgot soldiers read patterns better than anyone. Lights out never meant quiet. The barracks breathed metal bunks ticking as they cooled, a corridor fan dragging the dark in a slow, circular sigh. I lay on my rack with boots, off-duty shirt folded sharp on the chair phone, face down beside a green notebook. The command center's glow still lingered in my eyes like phantom grids on the ceiling. Every constellation was a line, and every line bent home. Magnolia was never just an address. Heat-slick porch railings, cicadas sawing time into the wood. My grandmother's hand guiding mine across brass, a small cloth, and patient circles until the metal stared back certain. Angle your light, she'd say. See what's really there. I pictured the study where dust motes danced. Shelves bowed with journals, spines, cracked margins crowded with narrow handwriting, field dates browned at the edges. Letters tied with ribbon slept in a cedar box that made the air taste like memory. The staircase still kept the nick where I fell at 10. None of that translated into square feet or comps. Once at 17, my mother opened a trunk and laughed at a spill of sepia portraits. Old junk, she said, and shut the lid as if closing a mouth. There was a sting, and my father looked away. The quickest way to hide a theft is to rename the thing being taken. Junk, not history. Disposable, not binding. It's easy to walk off with what you first declare worthless. I flipped the phone. The deed I'd pulled earlier waited behind a passcode, black letters pretending to be neutral. Catherine Ward, attorney in fact, for Alexandra Ward. The phrase sat like a boot print on fresh snow. Revoked. I could still feel the registered paper roughness from years ago, the clerk's stamp thudding like a gavel. Critical then. More critical now. Ramstein at night smelled of bleach and burnt coffee. I wrote 3 lines in block capitals: title, deed, revocation. Beneath them, a 4th intent. Soldiers are taught to separate noise from signal. In the quiet patterns, stop hiding. If you follow them far enough, they confess. The pantry's high shelf of jars. The parlor rug faded where the sun barged in. The piano with a chipped ivory from a cousin's stormy afternoon. My mind drew each room like a map. On the landing sat a narrow table with a bowl for keys and stamps. Inside that bowl, a brass magnolia brooch, petals worn smooth by turning. She wore it for visitors, a small ceremony that said the house belongs to its stories. Magnolia belongs to Alexandra, she told me on the porch, the summer before I shipped out. The words settled in bone the way sunlight warms wood. She didn't mean sentiment, she meant duty. And distance doesn't cancel duty. It measures it. I thought of Ethan's debts and Catherine's perfect laughter, and of my father's text, how he wrote we as if plural could wash a choice clean. I refused to spend anger like small change. Save it. Invest it in precision. The barracks clock blinked 23:41. I sat up and let the weight of the day settle where it belonged, in the plan, not the blood. A soldier in a dark room is not alone. The room is a map waiting for lines. I made a quiet oath that did not need a witness. The house had been the witness all along. Now. They stole history, not just property. Saying it out loud felt like setting a coordinate, not rage aim. I slid the laptop from under the bunk. The hinge clicked, and the screen rinsed the room in shallow blue. Runway lamps blinked their own sentences outside while satellites crossed with patient Morse. Laptop glows. I begin downloading Charleston County property records. In war, you need allies. In betrayal, you need the right attorney. The secure booth at Ramstein was a soundproofed box with a keypad and a low humming fan. I set my laptop on the ledge, squared my shoulders, and typed 4 words that fit the wound into a field report: illegal sale. Magnolia House. The cursor blinked like a metronome measuring my pulse. I hit send to Daniel Carter and listened to the booth deepen its hush, as if the air knew it had been sworn in. His callback landed in seconds. Major Ward baritone, courtroom calm. Yes, I said. I have documents. Good. Start from the facts. I kept it clean. Power of attorney revoked 5 years ago. Stamped, recorded, witnessed. Deed transferred 3 days ago. Buyer tied to my brother's fiancée. Price implausibly low. A text from my father that pretended consent could be conjured after the fact. While he listened, I dragged scans into a secure portal and watched progress bars creep like careful infantry. Paper rustled. Your revocation is solid, he said. If they used a dead POA, the title's infected. Add your active duty status, and the Service Members Civil Relief Act puts a wall around you. They did not go to court. That matters. My mother's signature flashed in my head. I kept it outside the door. What's the path? We make a straight line, Daniel said. Chain of title revocation on file notary, data market value comparison, Any side payments dressed as consulting. We file to freeze everything, then challenge the deed. They'll try family misunderstanding. We answer with dates and law. He paused. Do they know the POA was revoked? I have an email where my mother acknowledged it and called me overcautious. Then knowledge is provable. That closes exits. Keys tapped. I'll want 2 independent appraisals. Undervaluation shows intent. And we chase the money wires, emails, any memo that explains the bargain. The booth fan purred. Somewhere on base, a forklift chirped. Daniel's voice softened a fraction. You're trained to carry weight quietly. That discipline translates. We'll make noise only where it counts. He mentioned other cases, soldiers gone, relatives helping themselves. The pattern, always the same distance, invites thieves, paper collapses, distance. Send everything tonight, he said. I'll draft the complaint and a motion for temporary relief. Nothing moves until a judge sees it. I saved our notes, labeled the bundle Evidence, and opened a new folder named Operations. Tasks appeared as if they'd been waiting: bank records, notary commission, Kingsley filings, appraisals, witness outreach. The plan exhaled. Daniel cleared his throat. One more thing. They may smear you unstable from deployments, absent cold. Don't bite. They've started, I said. I won't. Good. A beat of silence, heavy as a signature. Then evenly the sentence that hardened the air. This isn't family drama. It's fraud. The words settled like a gavel. Outside, a jet spooled up iron thunder in the booth. I closed my eyes and pictured Magnolia's study, the journals aligned like Rank's letters breathing cedar, a house that knew our names, even when we pretended not to hear. I pictured a bench in Charleston, the wood grain, the empty moment just before a verdict writes the next chapter. I ended the call and let the fan count 5 slow seconds. My reflection in the glass looked the way I needed to feel: composed, aimed, already moving. I encrypted the uploads, checked timestamps twice, and tightened the laces of a plan that would not advertise itself until it had to. Distance is not weakness. Distance is runway. I closed laptop, whispering, then let's treat it like an operation. While I sat in uniform overseas, they carved Thanksgiving turkey without me and without shame. In the base cafeteria, fluorescent lights flattened the steam off bland turkey and the shine on my rank. I ate alone at a corner table, plastic fork tapping a slow cadence. Across the ocean, I could feel the ward dining room click into motion: mahogany crystal, the long runner that swallowed disagreements and dust. I didn't need a camera. Patterns replay until you stop them. Catherine would take the head like a witness stand, bracelets stacked like medals. Jonathan would smile, the kind of apology that never arrives. Ethan would sprawl, claiming inches he hadn't earned. Isabel Kingsley would measure everything, including love, in columns that totaled neatly. A spoon clattered here, a knife would answer there. The first cut into the bird always sounded like victory. Catherine would strike first. We kept Magnolia in the family for Ethan's future. She'd ladle gravy like evidence. The portraits would keep their painted silence while my chair, third from the end, sat empty and immaculate. Isabel would show teeth without warmth. She'd tilt her glass beneath the chandelier's crown and say, "My father made a generous gesture, letting the phrase carry interest and terms. Generosity, the word money uses when it wants forgiveness." Ethan would bask. He likes wins he doesn't have to earn. My absence always lifts him an inch. I cut my own turkey into squares because precision steadies the hand. The room filled with radio murmur, spoon scrape, the honest noise of people moving toward next tasks. Inside me, their room played louder. Catherine would pass stuffing and revise the past in passing. Alex never had time for tradition, she'd say. If anyone mentioned the will, she'd smile. Language can erase a signature when the audience wants it gone. Jonathan would nod at his plate and float. Under the table, I checked the county portal screen, dimmed. Deeds, affidavits, the tidy geometry of theft, her handwriting posed as authority again, my name as ventriloquy. The cafeteria clock clicked, time keeps fairness. People don't. Across the distance, a server would lay the carving knife like a scepter. Ethan would raise his glass thirsty for praise. Isabel would examine her reflection for a future. Catherine would stand queen of a board she'd tilted and give the line she'd rehearsed. To Ethan, the true heir. The flight line horn barked outside. A fork scraped metal and left a bright note. I swallowed and chased it with water that tasted faintly of copper and discipline. Their triumph smelled expensive and temporary, the way perfume evaporates into a room that remembers sweat. I cleared my tray, a small ritual of leaving without spectacle. The corridor smelled of jet fuel and disinfectant, the honest sense of work. A vending machine offered compromises that called themselves snacks, and I walked past thinking about legacies that call themselves investments. The difference is, who sleeps afterward? At the glass exit, night pressed its cold palm. I adjusted my collar and saw my grandmother's brooch in the reflection. Though I wasn't wearing it, memory laying a hand on the present. She taught me the only toast worth making, earn it. In war, you do not take what isn't yours. In families, some do, then rename the theft love. Back at my desk, the map glowed. Somewhere in the dark, a city exhaled and pretended it couldn't hear the keys to its own house changing hands. I opened my phone again because anger without action is just weather. I steadied my breathing and gripped the plan. They thought I was cornered. They forgot corners are where soldiers plan their counterattack. Ramstein after midnight was a careful machine breathing air units, sighing a printer coughing, once turbines rolling the dark into tidy spools. I kept the ops office dim and pulled Charleston onto my screen like a ghost map. Deed history assessor notes. Tax rolls, each click shaved away the version of events my parents would serve with silverware. Numbers don't take sides, but they reveal who pushed them. The appraisal Kingsley's people used was thin and dated stale comps, a storm-blighted property, and a litany of deferred maintenance written like a eulogy for a living house. I ran the market trend and the math twice. The gap hovered near $1 million, value bled out in slow, deliberate cuts. My jaw found the mission clench. My hands stayed calm. Screenshots, hash values, timestamps pinned like coordinates only I could read. Cut away the county office under sodium lights, shelves, and a sleeping stamp. Daniel's message pulsed in the secure window. I'm awake. Send it. I slid the deed revocation assessor ledger and my comps audit into the encrypted chute, watched progress bars bloom and vanish. He called while the last file still crawled. I finished labeling the folder. Your math, he asked. Conservative, I said. They shaved almost $1 million by choosing the past. Undervaluation shows aim, not error, he said. It tells a court someone planned the fall. A spreadsheet unfurled. I added a column called deflections and listed their usual alibis. Those lines make people nod. Exhibits make judges speak. Daniel paused. I have an old contact, Mark Reynolds, ex-Kingsley. He saw too much. I opened a new note and set his name in the header, clean and centered. Under it, questions like a briefing card. Who ordered comps? Who signed off? Who pushed the escrow past guardrails? Reynolds could give us internal emails instructions. Backchannel talk about keeping it in the family. Daniel said. We don't need confession. We need corroboration. Reach him, I said. I'll keep building the public spine until the private nerves twitch. We worked like good radios, short, clear, no drama. He chased notary commission history while I charted price drift across 10 riverfront blocks. The pattern drew itself, Magnolia's dot dropping off the curve like a feigned stumble staged for thieves. I saved the chart as PDF and PNG, hashed both, and tucked them into a chain of custody log. I stood stretched and felt the room accept the new gravity of my intent. Across the ocean, Catherine would be sleeping inside her chosen future. Ethan rinsed in white, Magnolia recast as an asset. My grandmother's voice returned to angle your light. See what's really there. A new ping. He answered, Daniel said. Mark cautious. No promises. Enough to keep the line warm. He left 6 months ago. Says some directives were uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is a lawyer's way to say weapon. I said, opening another note. If he has mails, we'll need header server stamps, any mention of expedited escrow, he typed. A cargo door thumped outside. The base kept breathing. I printed nothing. Paper vanishes. Drives hum. I let the log grow a spine line by line until their architecture pressed into the weight of the evidence, teaching me how to carry it. Daniel came back with gravel in his voice, the sound of a path becoming a road. With Reynolds, we may have a witness who can sink Kingsley. I felt the corner they'd shoved me into become a vantage. From outside, corners look like traps. From within, they are nests for sightlines and patience. I closed the last window, checked each checksum, and taught my face the shape of the answer they'd forced me to learn. I smile coldly. Then let's bait the trap. Justice starts like reconnaissance. Quiet, unseen, precise. Ramstein's night machinery exhaled in measured breaths, while the secure terminal bled a cold blue onto my hands. I kept the lights low and the door latched. Quiet keeps edges sharp. Charleston unfurled on my screen, plat maps, deed books, assessor notes layered like acetate over memory. I walked the ownership chain like a perimeter. From the estate to me, clean. 3 days ago, a hard turn to Seaside Capital Group at a price that looked like a typo with intent. I pulled fresh riverfront comps, then set them beside the buyer's stale set. Their curves sagged. The real one rose. The distance wasn't error. It was plan. A bubble from Daniel Rose. Send everything you have now. I zipped parcel history, comps analysis, and the assessor's deferred maintenance list, then slid the bundle through the encrypted chute. Green bars crept. A turbine spooled on the flight line. Between missions, the base held its breath. I used the stillness like cover. The notary block glinted with the tidy solemnity of ink. I enlarged it until pixels turned to gravel. Same commission number I'd seen on a spring transfer, the same signature that loved its flourish more than its duty. I checked the commission expiration and logged the seam, just a thread waiting to be pulled. Beneath the notary, the line that mattered more than any stamp, my mother signing a power she no longer held. Downtime wasn't down. It was quiet time. I built the mission binder digital tabs in order: title deed, revocation appraisals, notary escrow messages. Each exhibit got hashes, dates, and a one-sentence purpose a judge could read between blinks. I added a page called Intent that didn't editorialize undervaluation pattern, insider relationship, timing during deployment. A soldier's report, not a daughter's grievance. Daniel called from Charleston, voice lined with printer hum and old wood. He read while I narrated 2 clocks sinking across ocean. Your revocation's pristine, he said. Filed, indexed, acknowledged. I've also found the notarized deed they recorded. It's signed with that revoked POA. Confirmed, I said, dragging the revocation beside the deed like a before and after. Add Service Members Civil Relief Act and the floor shifts under them. I want the escrow timeline. If they rushed closing to beat scrutiny, it'll show an email lag and wire stamps. I'll map it, I said. I'm already lining the wires against the deed and bank hours. And Mark Reynolds' lead is warm, I said. He left 6 months ago. He hinted at directives that made him uncomfortable. Which means there are emails, he answered. In paper-loving places, orders never stay verbal. The terminal's fan lifted a note and held it. I let the room shrink to cursor width and plotted the transfers, a steady line of years, then a sudden kink where the sail dove beneath market like a slide. I annotated the break with WHO ordered this. Calm is a tool you carry. I pinged a clerk I knew at the county offstage, helped nothing improper. She confirmed posting times and attached a cleaner scan of the signature page. I thanked her with one line: appreciate the clarity. That's the currency here, clarity accumulated until it outweighs spin. Daniel returned with the sentence that felt like a gavel. We can void this sale, it's airtight. Silence held a beat the way you stare through optics after the target drops. The binder lay squared on my desktop like a kit you could unzip under pressure and know where everything lived. Across the water, a house of portraits slept with their backs to a dark window, and my parents slept under a roof they thought would hold. I leaned toward microphone as if proximity could carry through copper and glass and the miles between us. I whisper, then let's make them sweat. Every empire of favoritism collapses from within. I pictured the Kingsley estate the way a strategist sketches an enemy hall chandeliers like hanging verdicts, glass that turns faces into trophies, a table so long you could mistake distance for status. I wasn't there, but patterns talk. I expected the sequel, the kind where Polish hides, hairline fractures. Ethan would arrive 5 minutes late to seem important, then brag before the bread cooled, telling anyone who breathed that Magnolia was practically his already. He'd roll the word practically like a marble, letting it clack against his teeth, savoring the pretend inevitability. Catherine would smile support into the room napkin folded like a plan. She's fluent in reassurance that spends like credit. Isabel, though, she measures. She met me once years ago. Even then, she scanned my posture like a spreadsheet. Tonight, I imagine her crystal neckline catching light as she leans back, unimpressed, the kind of cold that isn't cruel so much as economical. She does not invest in volatility. She watches Ethan's boast and prices the risk. Robert Kingsley would preside with a banker's patience, eyes traveling the table, pausing where leverage lives. He'd let his son-in-law aspirant talk himself tall, then set the boundary. Loose ends sink empires. Not loud, not scolding, simply a law of gravity described aloud. Forks would pause. Catherine would nod as if she'd tied every knot. Ethan would laugh too quickly, a man buying time. I've learned to hear the hidden tracks under a family's soundtrack, the scrape of a chair that means retreat, the too bright compliment that is a receipt. Between the rosemary and the reduction, a draft creeps along the baseboards. It's the chill of a plan meeting weather. Isabel feels it first. The distance she puts between her wrist and Ethan's sleeve is a decimal point moving left. I picture her watching him perform ownership by monologue, then lowering her voice so a remark falls like a pin and rings. Alex will be back. She's not the type to surrender. It isn't a threat. It's a market signal. Catherine's lashes might not lift, but the air would tighten. Robert would tilt his glass-absorbing futures. Back on base, I sit with coffee gone cold and read the day's small harvest of tells, an unsubtle photo tagging the estate, a server's caption with too many hashtags, a florist's invoice forwarded by mistake. Mosaic is a soldier's hobby. One shard makes color. 10 make a picture. Inside those slivers, I trace the same geometry I saw on the deed, someone overplaying someone, underestimating someone else, getting ready to cut bait. Ethan has spent years floated by cushions his mistakes never punctured. But cushions sag. He mistakes Isabel's silence for approval the way he mistakes my quiet for permission. What he doesn't understand about quiet is that it's seldom empty. It accumulates. Calm. So I annotate what I can't yet prove, her cooled gaze. Robert's gloved warning, my mother's orchestrated nods. I note the speed of the wine refills, the way stories get shorter when nerves lengthen. I imagine the silver catching the tremor in Ethan's hand he thinks nobody sees. And I let the imagined scene dock against the one I'm about to force into daylight. One day soon, their voices will belong to transcripts instead of rooms. Their certainty will have page numbers. For now, I keep listening to the part of the music that never makes it to the melody, that thready undertone of fear trying to stay fashionable. Isabel doesn't need to be brave. She only needs to be practical. The math is drifting. The man beside her is an expense with good posture. If she is who I think she is tonight, will be the first subtraction. Ethan Freeze's first seed of fear planted. In battle, you don't strike first, you test their defenses. The courthouse lobby held weekday noise under a brass seal. Daniel crossed the magnetometer with a folio, checked the caption, and set our packet before the filing clerk. Tabs blinked as she flipped revocation. Deed. Appraisal variance. Notary commission. On page 1 line carried it. Service Members Civil Relief Act invoked. Active duty status attached. The stamp's thunk sounded even to me, watching by timestamps an ocean away, like a bolt sliding home. Ramstein's secure inbox pinged, filed, case number assigned. I opened the receipt. My binder lay like a map, title, chain, authority, value. Recon is patience with a checklist. Each box earned its mark. Across town, Catherine skimmed the certified letter like a menu. Preliminary injunction, she said, smoothing the paper until it lay flat. Cute. Jonathan hovered, hands in pockets, eyes avoiding print that could not be charmed into story. Daniel thanked the clerk, asked low and easy who tended escrow motions. Hayes is moving through his docket, she said. He doesn't like mess. Daniel snapped a photo of the file stamped cover and sent it to my encrypted line. I knew the name William Hayes, former Marine statutes read like orders, patience for facts, none for theater. I logged the assignment window and wrote, prepare escrow timeline. Serve Seaside. Confirm notary commission status. At the kitchen island, Catherine dialed Brennan's voicemail. Family matter. Overzealous daughter. Call me. To Jonathan she added, it's a bluff. She's deployed. She won't fly home to posture over paperwork. Daniel's complaint arrived clean and spare ownership to me. Revocation recorded 5 years ago. Sale 3 days ago using authority that did not exist. Buyer linked to the fiancé's family. Consideration far below market. Request to freeze any transfer or alteration pending hearing. He spends verbs like ammunition, only what hits. I scrolled the exhibits and let anger strain out until intent remained. The notary block wore the flourish I'd already enlarged to pixels. The commission date sat beside it, indifferent. My revocation stamp waited like a twin stone set to topple the first. Quiet work, decisive edges. Jonathan read the letter again, slower, as if a second pass might reveal a hidden clause that forgave everything. His throat clicked. What if she wins? Catherine hissed the old answer. She won't. A deputy pushed a cart of Redwelds toward Chambers. Daniel called from the shade on Meeting Street. We have a number and a clock. I added a checklist line, closed the binder, and let the base's night machinery be my metronome. If they meant to treat my absence as leverage, I would treat their overconfidence as supply. Catherine forwarded the packet to Brennan under Family, then colored the hearing week with errands. A clerk I knew sent a crisper scan of the signature page. I thanked her in 1 line and filed it into the tab that mattered. Paper has gravity when stacked. Between elevators and chambers, the cart rolled past a framed photo of a younger Hayes in uniform. The file with my name rose by the logic of time, not drama. It didn't beg. I pictured Magnolia's stair rail warmed by afternoon sun and felt that steadiness when reconnaissance becomes pressure on the hinge pin. We had the pin. Now we waited for the wobble. Jonathan stood at the sink, staring through glass as if the backyard could offer terms. Maybe we should talk to her, he said decades late. Catherine's smile didn't reach her eyes. Silence is strategy. Let Brennan handle it. I repeated the words that anchor me. Simple plans, clean evidence, steady hands. The next move belonged to the court. Judge Hayes reviews file expression unreadable. And as the gavel of fate hovers above, I invite you to stay with me on this journey. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next turn in the battle where silence will break and the real war for justice begins. They underestimated me, so they struck where they thought I was weakest. I wasn't there, but Brennan's office always smelled like paper heated. Catherine angled toward the window, the harbor polishing her reflection. Abandonment, Brennan said, tapping a paragraph. She left the property unattended for years. The court will see a house adrift. Dress it up, Catherine replied. Family duty. Necessary action. Keep Magnolia stable for Ethan. Her bracelets chimed like tiny verdicts. An ocean away, their motion landed in my inbox. Declaratory relief owners' abandonment blessing requested for what they'd already done. Abandonment is a story told by whoever holds your keys. The word tried to tilt the floor. I locked my elbows until the room steadied. Daniel called. It's noise, he said, courthouse brick calm. We've got your revocation, your status, the timing. We hold center. Let them orbit. Paper wasn't enough for Catherine. She seeded whispers in rooms that love the scent of rumor. A cousin heard I was unstable from deployments. An acquaintance texted without punctuation, "You okay?" In an afternoon, I was recast from officer to spectacle by people who'd never worn my boots. It almost found a seam. Sirens. Edged sleep. I opened Magnolia's study instead, journals like ribs letters breathing cedar. When the pulse lifted, I sat with it until it lowered. Back at Brennan's, a paralegal slid in our injunction. He smirked. Preemptive. Catherine's smile lengthened. She always liked rules. Brennan dictated a statement for press that didn't exist, devoted parents, complex estate, loving correction. That night, Daniel and I mapped the counter. We answer abandonment with timeline, he said. We'll transfer maintenance receipts, assessor photos, your deployment orders. No judge will call that abandonment. Catherine will, I said. She doesn't get a gavel. My phone buzzed with a thread from the Kingsley wing. Not to me, to Robert. Daniel's contact heard the edges while a door stood almost closed. Debt numbers, interest, like a slow injury, Ethan's name beside Magnolia. The sale wasn't legacy. It was a mop. Robert's voice went iron cool. You told me this would be clean. Isabel's reply was minimalist and lethal. It can be again. I forwarded the summary. Daniel didn't crow. Motive, he said. Not proof, but a spine. On base, I walked the midnight loop tarmac, shining like a kept secret. The smear did what smears do. Then facts did what facts do. I recited the SRA clause under my breath and let the air file my edges smooth again. By morning, Brennan's motion was docketed. Our response filed before coffee cooled. I attached photos of Magnolia's service flags and the maintenance log my grandmother kept in blue ink, small and steady. Catherine pivoted to interviews that were mirrors. Our daughter has been gone a long time, she told a collector of other people's business. We love her. We made hard choices. Love redrafted as acquisition. Choices braided into fate. The city nodded from good china. I answered with evidence. The binder on my screen had grown a spine. Each tab opened to a page that did not need me to explain it. A colleague knocked once, left coffee. Quiet is the language of real support. I titled a list Stability and logged sleep, workouts, tasks finished ahead of schedule. Daniel sent a final line before calendars tightened. We stay simple. Facts, dates, law. Let them improvise. We don't. I opened the portal and pictured Brennan smoothing his tie, Catherine angling her chin, Ethan congratulating a mirror. Somewhere, Isabel filed a new thought under exit. Somewhere, Robert measured loss in columns that end with someone else paying. I clenched jaw. They're playing dirty. Good. So will I. Sometimes justice hides in unexpected allies. The cafe on Broad kept its lights low as if secrecy were policy. A ceiling fan pushed warm air in patient circles. Daniel chose a table that faced the door and the street. When Mark Reynolds arrived, he was already apologizing with his posture. He didn't touch the menu. Account in hands, sleepless eyes. No names. He said, then flushed. Sorry. Habit. Mark works. Daniel answered. Coffee. He shook his head. My nerves have had enough. He tracked window reflections, then fixed on the folio. I saw the injunction. I shouldn't be here. And yet, Daniel said, you left Kingsley 6 months ago. Resigned, Mark said, as if the word broke in his mouth. I handled comps and appraisals. Magnolia landed on my desk with a sticky note that smelled like money. Orders were simple lean on deferred maintenance. Ignore waterfront premiums, pull older comps. I flagged it. Robert's office replied, strategic valuation family transaction. The dirt was in the translation. Show me, Daniel said. Mark placed his phone on the table like a confession. Emails, threads, calendar invites. I archived before HR boxed my plants. If this burns me, at least the truth has mass. Start with directives from Robert, Daniel said, and any mail where Catherine Ward inserts herself. Mark's mouth thinned. There are messages where she provides context. She pushed a timeline close before quarter-end avoid competitive bids label the discount family stewardship. A wire log shows a payment to Catherine from a Kingsley subsidiary styled as consulting. It isn't. Daniel didn't move. Knight leaned on the glass. The cafe smelled of lemon oil and old wood, a hush trained by habit caution. Transmit what you can. I can do better. He slid a thumb drive wrapped in a receipt. Headers, server stamps, attachments. He met Daniel's eyes and let the verdict drop. If this goes public, Kingsley is finished. Daniel let the sentence sit. He set the drive on the folio and breathed. You understand exposure. I do. I also understand collateral. I warned them the numbers were theater. Robert called me dramatic. Catherine called me sentimental. They called Magnolia unused capacity. I called it a house. That ended my ladder. A waitress set down water. Mark finally drank. I'd prefer anonymity, he said, but if subpoenaed, I'll testify. I won't let them launder this through the word family. Daniel's phone buzzed me secure line. He answered. I listened while he summarized directives from Robert, emails by Catherine, a routed consulting payment, calendar invites synced to the rushed closing. My shoulders loosened for the first time in days. Why now? I asked when he handed the phone to Mark. He breathed. Because your mother called history junk, he said. Because my father wore a uniform to fix our roof after Hugo. Because I haven't slept well since. Thank you, I said. You're doing what's right. He didn't accept absolution, he offered proof. There's a line where Catherine writes, she won't know the difference. I thought you should. I do, I said. Outside, a bus sighed. The window held their silhouettes, one steady, one torn. My voice, a third line. Daniel ended the call, logged chain of custody in neat handwriting, and paid cash. Mark rose, shoulders a little less folded. I know what they are, he said. I'd like a court to know it too. Stay reachable, Daniel replied. And careful. Mark left by the side door. The fan kept circling. Daniel pocketed the drive like a message, stepped into the damp night and headed for a scanner. A safe, a docket that had just grown teeth. The map we'd drawn in pencil finally had ink. I smile coldly. Then it's time the court sees it. The courtroom was quieter than any war zone I'd known, but the stakes felt just as lethal. I had heard mortars echo through valleys and felt the dull concussion of blasts against the ribs, but none of that prepared me for the silence of Charleston County Courthouse on that October morning. The wood-paneled chamber seemed to drink every sound. The tick of the clock over the bench sounded like a hammer. Every movement, the shuffle of papers, the creak of leather chairs became a declaration. I sat rigid at the defense table, my uniform pressed sharp silver oak leaves bright against dark fabric. Duty carried me across oceans, but this was the battlefield that mattered now. Judge William Hayes entered with no wasted motion, his robe cutting clean lines against the grain of the walls. Case of Ward versus Ward, he announced, his voice low but edged. Counsel, identify yourselves. The clerk's pen scratched like a metronome, recording every word. Brennan stood first, his tie already loose. Robert Brennan, representing Catherine and Jonathan Ward and their son Ethan Ward. He gestured with a rehearsed sweep, almost theatrical. This family acted only to preserve their heritage to protect a property languishing in absence. The word heritage snapped something inside me, but I held my face still. Across the aisle, Catherine's chin lifted higher, Jonathan's hands folded carefully, Ethan slouched with the indifference of someone convinced the world owed him its applause. Isabel Kingsley sat beside him, composed, her eyes shifting like a hawk's. Behind them, Robert Kingsley leaned back, unreadable, the faintest curl of disdain at the corner of his mouth. Hayes's gaze moved to my side. Defense. Daniel rose. The courtroom seemed to adjust to him, his voice steady, clean. Daniel Carter, representing Major Alexandra Ward, United States Air Force. He let the title ring deliberately. Major Ward is present, seated here, and ready to contest the unlawful transfer of her property, Magnolia House. The weight of his words filled the chamber. Brennan twitched, shifting his stance. Catherine's smirk stretched, but her eyes flickered when the title major landed. Isabel leaned back, studying me. My uniform carried no medals on the chest that morning, but the service ribbon bar glinted enough to remind them I hadn't earned silence easily. Hayes adjusted his glasses, flipping through the folder. Major Ward, he said, his voice neither warm nor cold, simply formal. You are currently assigned overseas? Yes, Your Honor, I answered evenly. Ramstein Air Base, Germany. Intelligence operations. My tone was clipped, measured. I had rehearsed the cadence as if it were part of an after-action briefing. Brennan pushed forward quickly. Your Honor, we contend that Magnolia House was abandoned. The family maintained it, protected it. The decision to sell was prudent, necessary, for Daniel cut in with calm precision. With respect, Your Honor, Magnolia House was left solely to Major Ward under the will of Eleanor Hartman Ward. The power of attorney used was revoked years prior, and the sale occurred during active deployment. Federal protections apply. Hayes lifted one hand and Brennan's words collapsed mid-sentence. The judge's silence pressed harder than any reprimand. He turned toward Catherine, who had leaned forward with a smirk poised like a blade. Mrs. Ward, do you understand the severity of the allegations before us? Catherine's smile widened, false ease spreading across her face. Of course, Your Honor. But Alexandra, our daughter, hasn't been home. She doesn't understand what it takes to keep family legacy intact. Hayes's eyes narrowed, the chamber drawing tighter, his voice sliced clean. That's Major Ward. Show respect. The correction detonated in the stillness. Brennan blinked hard. Jonathan swallowed audibly. Ethan shifted in his chair as if the floor had tilted. Isabel's lips pressed together, hiding a smile that wasn't kindness. Robert Kingsley's brows arched almost imperceptibly, as though cataloging weakness. For the first time in memory, Catherine's smirk faltered, her mask cracking along the edges. And I sat there, spine straight, expression calm, knowing the first breach had been made. They built their scheme on lies. I built my case on documents. The second morning opened like a file folder, hinges creaking, light cut to size. The wood-paneled room held its breath as Judge Hayes took the bench. I sat in uniform, palms flat, the table's edge cool against my wrists. Yesterday drew the battle lines. Today, we would lay track. Daniel rose with a binder whose tabs looked like small flags. Your Honor, he said, we begin with authority. He set 2 certified copies on the cart, gave duplicates to Brennan. First, the recorded revocation of power of attorney, stamped, witnessed, indexed. Second, the later deed transferring Magnolia House, executed under that revoked authority. Pages turned with a soft thunder. Brennan mouthed dates as if numbers might forgive. Catherine watched like paper was fog she could wave away. I watched the notary flourish, bloom again, then the commission date sit beside it, serene and damning. Daniel's voice stayed even. No feelings. Facts. The same party who acknowledged revocation years ago signed as agent anyway, while this officer served abroad. Brennan found a cough. There was confusion about a recorded instrument. Daniel didn't raise his voice. The clerk marked the exhibits. Daniel pivoted. Next correspondence. Emails between Catherine Ward and Robert Kingsley coordinating valuation tactics and timing. The screen blinked to life. Text marched requests to lean on stale comparables, to emphasize deferred maintenance to avoid bids and keep this in the family. Brennan stood. Context matters. Families speak loosely. Then the bank records can supply yours, Daniel said. He lifted a ledger. $45,000 from a Kingsley subsidiary to Catherine Ward styled as consulting posted days after closing. No contract, no invoice, no scope. Paper crossed the aisle like a verdict. Calm felt like acceleration. Fraud looks complicated until the pieces sit together. Then it looks inevitable. Mrs. Ward volunteers her expertise. Brennan tried. Not at 45,000, Daniel said. He looked at me then, at the bench. The pattern isn't subtle. Revoked authority resurrected. A sale far below market to the fiancé's family. Timed during deployment. A routed payment without paper. The gallery went still. I could hear a bracelet settle. Jonathan swallowed. The sound traveled. Daniel faced Brennan. We also preserved messages where Catherine Ward wrote, "She won't know the difference." They counted on distance to blur the line. Brennan's pen clicked frantic punctuation. Daniel turned to the bench, voice clear and final. This was not a mistake. It was fraud. Silence sweeps courtroom. Hayes looked down at the revocation, then at the deed, then at the payment record as though aligning lenses. When he looked up, his eyes had the steady temperature of steel. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The law was speaking through the paper. Catherine pressed her lips into a new shape composure trimmed to fit shrinking options. Brennan backed into his chair. Daniel's binder waited with one tab left for witnesses, but the room already knew where the road was headed. I thought of my grandmother's brooch of cedar in the study of the day I filed that revocation, because trust needs locks as well as love. Across from me, my mother sat in clothes she wore for winning. They looked suddenly like a costume returned to the rental counter. Hayes tapped his pen once. Proceed, he said softly. We didn't add volume. We added weight. Daniel entered ledgers and notary commission details. He charted the appraisal gap. He pointed to calendar invites that rushed closing before scrutiny could catch up. Each piece nested, then clicked. By the time we rested, no one in the gallery moved. The clerk lifted the marked exhibits as if they were glass. Jonathan looked at his hands like a man reading a map that no longer includes his town. Brennan whispered to Catherine. She didn't answer. Isabel stared forward. Robert Kingsley pocketed a card. We stood. The bench emptied. The room released a fraction of its held air. Jonathan lowers his head. Catherine stiffens, mask slipping. Sometimes the truth needs a voice. Ours came trembling but steady. The oath was quieter than the scrape of the chair. Mark Reynolds folded his fingers at the witness stand, giving the tremor a job. Daniel stood at the lectern. Judge Hayes leaned a fraction forward the way a range officer does when the line goes live. State your name and occupation. Mark Edward Reynolds, former senior analyst at Kingsley Development. Were you involved in the valuation for Magnolia House? Yes. He fixed on a knot in the rail, then began, careful truly. The first email subject, strategic valuation family. Emphasize deferred maintenance. Pick older, slower comps. Ignore fresh riverfront sales. Backdated invoices to fit a rushed closing. Calendar invites renamed and moved off record. When Daniel asked who set the directives, Mark looked past the plaintiff's table. Robert Kingsley's office, he said. Follow-ups from Catherine Ward providing context and a timeline. Brennan rose. Objection, hearsay. Emails are exhibits. Daniel answered. Overruled, Hayes said, dry as paper. Did Mr. Kingsley give a target? Daniel asked. Mark nodded. He told us, we need Magnolia cheap for Ethan. The sentence hung like a banner no one wanted to read. Ethan stiffened. Isabel's gaze slid an inch from his sleeve. Catherine's jaw strapped on a smile. Were documents altered to support that goal? Yes. A draft appraisal lost 2 higher comps. A supplemental inspection invoice was backdated 2 weeks so escrow would clear before quarter end. I flagged each change. I was told not to be romantic about numbers. By whom? Robert in person. Catherine by email. Brennan tried the soft route. Mr. Reynolds, you left Kingsley on poor terms. Correct, I resigned. I kept copies because I couldn't sleep. A deployed officer was being treated as absence, not as owner. Hayes's mouth compressed. The gallery went quiet enough for Vent to speak. Daniel lifted headers and server stamps. True and correct copies. They are. When you raised concerns that I was making this personal and that she'd never know the difference, I was told the sale kept the house in the family and solved a liquidity problem. A slow flush climbed Jonathan's neck. He studied his hands like they might volunteer an alibi. Why testify? Daniel asked. Mark turned to me as if meeting a person who'd been a theory on a spreadsheet. Because distance isn't consent, he said. Because my father wore a uniform. Because I kept hearing the word legacy used as a rag. He swallowed. They said she'd never know. She was thousands of miles away. Brennan shuffled papers. You disliked your supervisor, didn't you? I disliked being asked to lie. Isn't it true you sought employment with a Kingsley competitor after I resigned? None required me to falsify records. Hayes raised a palm. Enough. He turned a page and let silence grade the room. No further questions, Daniel said. We listened to the clock. Brennan tried to staple the edges back together. His questions fell away. Mark stepped down a little taller than he'd climbed. Robert Kingsley's stare followed him, calculating distances that suddenly grew long. Isabel crossed her legs, expression colder by design. On our table, the witness tab lay open, but a voice had put weight where paper already pointed. I kept my hands flat so Victory wouldn't get ideas. Hayes capped his pen and looked at plaintiff's table as if asking, anything to explain while explanation has posture. No one moved. Catherine adjusted a bracelet that had never looked cheaper. Gasps in gallery. Isabel turns coldly toward Ethan. Empires of arrogance collapse not with explosions but with silence. The hallway outside courtroom 2B held its breath. Portraits watched with practiced neutrality. I stood in uniform by the wall spine, straight hands loose, letting other people make noise. Isabel moved first. She drew the ring from her finger like a splinter and set it in her palm without looking at Ethan. We're done, she said, flat final. Tell your mother I won't be part of this. The stone refused to shine under fluorescent truth. Robert stayed 5 paces off and did not object. Ethan blinked. Issy. This is temporary, he muttered, reaching missing. She gave a single step that felt like a continent. Temporary is for weather, she said. This is character. Her heels counted down the rest of their engagement to the elevator's chime. Catherine didn't follow. She pivoted on Jonathan, voice low, polished, lethal. You were supposed to handle her, she said. Meaning me, meaning everything? Jonathan studied a scuff in the marble. You said it would hold, he answered. Brennan hovered with a file that looked like a flimsy raft. We can explain, he offered. We'll manage the narrative. Catherine's smile thinned. Narratives are for people who lack evidence against them, she said, and even she heard the truth hiding in her phrasing. Clerks moved past. Judge Hayes stepped into the corridor with silence walking at his side. Counsel closed distance. The hallway performed stillness. Counsel, he said. Be advised, on or off the record, this case may warrant criminal referral. The words didn't rise. They descended heavy as law. Brennan nodded too fast. Catherine blinked like a lens trying to focus. Jonathan's shoulders folded. Ethan shoved a hand through his hair and chose flight. I'm done, he muttered to no one, shouldered the door, and let the humid air swallow his exit. No one followed. Outside, Charleston continued its rituals. Palmettos hissed. A bus sighed. I took the shade of a column and let the courthouse take the heat from my back. Civilization keeps moving while families detonate in slow motion. Jonathan found a bench and lowered himself like a man discovering the map in his hands was for another city. He didn't look at me. He looked at the door as if waiting for an alternate life to walk back through it. Brennan murmured contingency. Catherine let him eyes fixed on a place that was not here. Reporters circled. Daniel kept them at distance with gestures that were polite and final. "We'll speak in court," he said. I stayed quiet. Properly used silence is leverage. It forces the other side to fill it with words they wish they hadn't spoken. We walked the perimeter once Daniel and I, our talk, all nouns and verbs, escrow, ledger, hearing, remedy. When he peeled off to draft, I stood again with my back to the stone and let the building hum with its indifferent history. I thought of Magnolia's cedar and the promises it had kept longer than any person in that hallway. Inside, an elevator chimed. Catherine reappeared alone now, bracelets aligned mouth arranged in the face she wore for victory. She scanned the corridor, found no allies, and straightened anyway. For the first time, the performance showed seams. Somewhere, a clock ticked loud as a gavel. A pen scratched. A sigh stalled. We faced each other across 20 feet of limestone and stale air. I didn't move. Neither did she. We had learned different versions of stillness. Only one of them had been built for truth. Catherine's perfect composure fractures, while I remain silent, steady. Justice doesn't roar. It lands like a gavel-sharp final, undeniable. November turned the live oaks outside the courthouse a darker green, the kind that drinks rain and judgment alike. Inside, the wood gleamed as if the room had been polished for a reckoning. I sat with Daniel at our table, uniform, crisp, breath, slow. Across the aisle, Catherine wore authority like perfume, Jonathan like a borrowed coat. The seats for Ethan and Robert stayed empty, absence framing guilt better than any speech. Judge Hayes took the bench and the air contracted. On the matter of Ward versus Ward, he said, voice, even cadence drilled by years. He read the posture of the case as though it were a map. The will, the revocation, the deed, the price that pretended not to know the market, the routed payment that pretended not to have a purpose. Each point landed with the dull shine of a spent shell. Title to Magnolia House, he said, reverts immediately and fully to Major Alexandra Ward. A pen scratched. Catherine didn't blink. Jonathan folded in on himself as if a hinge inside finally gave. Any further attempt to encumber or transfer is enjoined pending this court's further order. He turned a page. Defendants Catherine and Jonathan Ward are ordered to pay restitution for legal costs and punitive damages. He named the amounts, numbers that made the gallery rustle, a ledger closing on a lie. Then he looked up and let the room meet him. Based on the evidence presented, this court notes potential fraud and refers the record to the appropriate authorities for review. Brennan sank a fraction. Daniel's hand stayed still on the table. I felt not triumph, but alignment, the click of a lock meeting its key. Hayes let the silence widen, then narrowed it with words I knew would outlive the day. To betray a soldier at war is to betray the very country they serve. It was not shouted. It did not need to be. The sentence struck lodged and held. Catherine's mouth shaped the beginning of an argument, then found it could not stand. Jonathan's gaze crushed into the papers in front of him as if a different story might be hiding there, waiting to be read. The bailiff called the next case. The machine of justice kept moving because it has to. In the hall, the light looked thinner. Reporters tested microphones, then lowered them when Daniel shook his head. The filings speak, he said. I didn't add to them. I shook his hand, squared my cap, and felt the weight of a small object in my pocket, the key that had slept under a welcome mat too long. Outside, Charleston breathed salt and bus exhaust palmettos whispering like old uniforms. A gust lifted the edges of my orders and laid them down again. The building behind me hummed with other people's crises, other endings. Mine had been shaped into a sentence, then a signature. That was enough. Behind closed doors, consequences had already started walking. Canceled checks, hard calls, friends turning into witnesses. I thought of the study at Magnolia Cedar and paper letters lined like ribs, of the porch swing that counted my childhood summers, of a future where veterans would sit in that same shade and remember without being alone. Justice isn't a roar. It is a room that holds the right echo, and a door that opens when it should. When you've walked through betrayal the way I did, every step feels heavier than the last. I want to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent or fought for what was right? Leave me your thoughts, your judgment, even your doubts. Your words matter because they remind me this fight was never just mine. It belongs to everyone who has been dismissed, underestimated, or stolen from. And if my story offers any lesson, it's this: protect your legacy no matter how small. Guard your truth with evidence, not anger. Justice may move slowly, but when it comes, it is undeniable.